Hi, everyone, and welcome to my EDL 850 case study on copyright in the computer, regulations that govern technology. To start off in our first section, I'm going to summarize the case. So, to begin, let's talk about what has happened or what is happening. Through a PTA sponsored fundraising event, teachers are allocated money to purchase new software for their computers. The library media specialist or computer lab teacher, Mrs. Lin, decided to take the commercially produced computer programs that were purchased from the PTA sponsored event and that are copyrighted and copy them onto flash drives and share them with other teachers in the school building. Currently, Mrs. Brandon has brought the concern to Mr. Sample's attention and he has addressed the issue with Mrs. Lin. Where did this event occur? It occurred at a rural school called the St. Regis School, which is 25 miles from a large city. And the school serves K 8 students and has two teachers per grade level. Who is or might be involved in or concerned by this situation, and what do they have to say about it? Mr. Sample is most likely concerned of the consequences his school district and staff might face for violating the copyright laws. Mrs. Brandon is most likely concerned for the consequences she might face for knowing that other teachers are violating copyright laws. Mrs. Lynn, she believes that she is saving the school and district money and doesn't think anyone will know or care about the copyright or the copies for classroom teachers. And the PTA most likely is unaware of the violation of copyright laws. And then other classroom teachers at the St. Regis School, they're most likely unaware of the consequences associated with the violation of copyright laws. Part two, we're going to talk about any of the legal or ethical issues involved with this situation. So, has anyone been harmed by the action or decision of another? In my opinion, the St. Regis School faculty and staff and the school district has been harmed by the decision of Mrs. Lynn. Now, I do know that the idea was brought up and suggested by other teachers. However, Mrs. Lynn was the one who followed through with the copying of the copyrighted software. Does the action or the situation contravene an existing law? I do believe that it breaks district policy and copyright law. According to our school district policies, it prohibits the transferring of copyrighted materials to or from any district network without the express consent of the owner of the copyright. And for copyright law, copying software is an act of copying copyright infringement. Was there a breach of contract? Were the actions discriminatory or constituted harassment? I said, given the breaking of contract and law, consequences could range from restriction or cancellation of access to network or internet access, and the district could also suspend and or terminate the employees. Law enforcement should or could be notified of any inappropriate use. So, in one sentence, the situation at hand is Mrs. Lynn has committed an act of copyright infringement and broken district acceptable use policy by copying and sharing commercially produced computer software to other teachers in the school building. Now, let's dive deeper into the facts of this case study. So, who are the people that are involved? And what are their backgrounds or customs? So, Mr. Samples has been a principal at the school for 3 years. He cares about creating positive relationships with his staff, and he did not grow up in the St. Regis area. Mrs. Lynn is the computer, media, and librarian teacher at St. Regis Elementary School. It is unknown of how many years she has been at the school, but she does work collaboratively for what is best for teachers and students. Some of the things that she did at the school were create forms for teachers to request technology, organize calendars so teachers knew when they could use the computer lab, and also seeks input from staff on what ways she can make the school computer room better. Mrs. Williams is an experienced third grade teacher who is always taught at St. Regis Elementary. And then Mrs. Brandon is a new third grade teacher at St. Regis this year, but she does have 3 years of experience in another school. It does seem that she is aware of copyright laws and the acceptable use policy. And then other people that are involved would be the other faculty and staff at St. Regis K-8 school. And based on from the case study, a majority of them do support Mr. Sample and his vision for the St. Regis school. And that was gathered from a survey that Mr. Sample sent out after his second year at the school. The parents involved in this would be the PTA members who they support teachers through fundraising for classroom supplies and technology. And they also volunteer in the school based on what was mentioned in the case study. And then the last people to talk about would be the students. And there are 420 students, and most of them live in the rural area of St. Regis community. The place would be the St. Regis community. In the community, there are two grocery stores, one drugstore, and a few other small businesses. It was mentioned that when students go to high school, they do have a long bus to the city. And then the program would be the St. Regis K-8 school. There are two special education teachers, two general education teachers per grade level, 420 students, and the students, like I said before, are bused into the city after 8th grade. Now let's review and prioritize the information given to us. Could this situation or decision be damaging to stakeholders or the community? Yes, because the infringement of copyright could result in financial penalties that, according to the case study, the school district doesn't have, and or suspension or termination of staff and faculty. What individuals and groups have the most highest stake in the outcome? Well, the St. Regis School District, faculty at St. Regis K School, Mrs. Lynn, and Mr. Sample. Have all the relevant stakeholders been consulted? Further consultation needs to be had with the superintendent of the schools. Can I learn more about the situation? Questions that I would ask prior to moving forward would be have all staff members copies the software to the computers in their classroom. Sorry, what that should say is have all staff members copy the software to the computers in the classroom. Have students use the copied software in the classroom? Did Mrs. Lynn know of the copyright restrictions prior to copying the software? And then how much would it cost to pay to have the four program softwares installed for all the second, third, and fourth grade teachers? Because in the case study, it said that those were the only grade levels where the software was copied to. Do I know enough to make a decision? I do believe a decision can be made. However, depending on the outcome of the decision, more information may be needed. Now let's identify the options and the possible consequences for those options. So, option one would be to take no action, and the teachers and staff will continue to use the commercially produced computer programs in their classrooms. Option two would be to uninstall all commercially produced computer programs, which means that depending on the needs, you may either need to hire someone or have staff uninstall the commercially produced computer programs from their classroom computers. The intermediate options that I would consider would be to create a budget or fundraise for the upcoming school year to install the computer software programs for the classroom teachers. I would also provide training at the next staff meeting that communicates about the laws, rights, policies, and regulations for copyright laws, as well as the district's acceptable use policies. Another kind of step that I would take following that training would have the staff and faculty sign that they agree and understand their rights and responsibilities in regards to copyright and acceptable use policies. Next, I would create a system or process for requesting additional software or programs for school technology. And then I would create a technology coordinator position who is responsible for the management of school technology software and the proper use of. Looking at the options and the pros and cons of them, the pros of option one would be teachers would be able to continue to use the computer software, and the district would save money for not having to purchase additional licenses for the software. The cons, though, however, if the district did get caught, they would be charged with copyright infringement, resulting in most likely monetary damages. The staff may view Mr. Sample as an individual who lacks integrity if he allows his staff to continue using the software that they do not have the proper licensing for. And Mrs. Brandon will most likely leave the school because of the lack of best practices given by Mr. Samples. Option two would be to uninstall all the computer programs from the classroom teachers. And the pros of this would be that the school district most likely would avoid copyright infringement. However, the staff may be unhappy with the decision of Mr. Sample. I do believe the best option would be going with option two, which is to uninstall all the commercially produced computer programs. Why is this the best decision? Well, for me, this is the best decision for our school because continuing using the copyrighted software on the classroom teachers' computers could result in monetary damages to the school district, resulting in potential cuts to student opportunities. How can my decision be implemented with the greatest care? Well, prior to implementing the plan, a conversation should be had with Mrs. Lynn to explain the potential severity of the issue, reminding her that I do understand her intentions and I know that they are good, but it is too risky to allow this kind of um, action to be happening. Have all the stakeholders been consulting? Prior to implementing the plan, a conversation should be had with the district superintendent and potentially the Board of Education members, depending on guidance from the superintendent. So, through that conversation, the question should be asked if local law enforcement should also be notified or the program software owner be contacted. And have I identified creative options? I do believe this to be the most appropriate given the circumstances. I will also follow through with the intermediate options I mentioned before in the previous slide. Implementing decisions. So, what is my plan of action? These are the steps that I would take depending on the outcomes of those. Whatever action I took, they might need to be moved around. But prior to beginning, I would communicate with the district superintendent about the copyright infringement. Then I would communicate with Mrs. Lynn about the copyright infringement. Then I would communicate with the whole staff on the copyright infringement and the plan of action to rectify. Out of those three communications with those stakeholders, depending on what conversations are had with either district superintendent or Mrs. Lynn or the staff, the Board of Education most likely will need to be notified at some point in that communication. I would then either hire an outside source or internally organize the uninstallation of the computer software. Then I would host a training session on copyright laws and acceptable use policies for our staff. I would then reach out to the PTA to help organize a fundraising event for the installation of computer software programs for all classroom teachers. Then I would create a system or process for uh, additional for requesting additional software programs for school technology. Lastly, I would communicate with district administrators on the possible creation of a technology coordinator position that would oversee the district technology to make sure that these types of situations would not happen again. What may happen? Well, the staff may feel frustrated at first that the resources they were originally using in the classroom no longer be an option. However, after discussion of, or really just communication on what the possible consequences would be, most likely they would feel thankful that we're kind of rectifying the situation in the most legal way. But then I would make sure to ensure them, though, that there is a plan of action to get those resources back in the classroom so they can be using those to help their students to support their students. And who needs to know? Well, the district superintendent, the St. Regis staff or faculty, the BTA, PTA, and potentially the Board of Education members. Can this information be dealt, or can this situation be dealt with on my own? I do believe, since there was the breaking of law, that upper administration needs to be informed and involved in the process. What are the possible outcomes? The consequences of this situation could range from suspension of use of technology to termination from the school district. We need to make sure, though, that we are following those copyright laws and adhering to our district's acceptable use policies. In conclusion, through this case study, I was able to promote the current and future success and well being of all staff at the St. Regis K 8 school by applying my knowledge of copyright laws and acceptable use policies to improve our school's management of use of technology. And through this case study, I communicated the laws and policies of copyright and acceptable use policies. By doing so, I made sure we're aware of the laws and policies and that they were following them appropriately. When the law or policy had been broken, I communicated the infringement and took the proper steps to rectify the situation by communicating with all stakeholders. Lastly, here are my references.